Welcome to the Healing Broken Families podcast. I'm Barbara LaPointe, and each week I am privileged to host healing conversations around divorce, parental alienation, and high conflict personalities. Today I'm delighted to be sitting down with Nicki Billou, and my guest is special. He is a #1 international best-selling author of 8 books, a host of a top 10 iTunes podcast, and he is known as the Millionaire Maker for having helped 80 plus people add 6 to 8 figures to their annual income. So he invites us to make the difference that we were born to make. Welcome, Nicki.
Thanks, Barbara, for having me on the show. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, it's very nice to meet you, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say. And I wanted to start off by asking you, if this podcast were just to unfold perfectly, as if we could just hit a button and our conversation would be perfect, who might be listening, and what might we say to one another?
Well, I would hope that the people that are listening to this are people that are dealing with relationship issues and are wanting to find a way around them and find a way out of them. I would hope that you and we have a brilliant conversation where we connect as human beings and we create enough value in our discussion that both of us learn something and the people listening to us learn something too.
I'm in. So just moving forward and noting that you also facilitate and host a men's group. Is that correct? I thought that might be a nice place to start. So I was curious, what's important to you, Nicki, about hosting a men's group, and why is hosting a men's group valuable for men?
Well, in the last 50, 60 years, a lot of things have changed in our society. And one of them is that men are unsure of how to go out there and be men anymore. And there's a lot of men that are lost. And in particular, men don't have other men that they can really count on that are real friends. The average man doesn't even have one real friend. I mean, that's crazy, but that's the facts and that's the truth. And the type of group that we run is an opportunity for men to be around other men, having iron sharpen iron, and have an opportunity to, learn how to be the best version of themselves rather than being lazy and slipping back into a life of mediocrity and comfort.
Wow, does that ever resonate with me, Nicki? Because I'm not kidding you. I was actually thinking of a man that I know this morning that does not have one friend. So I believe what you're saying. And is that what you mean when you say it's difficult perhaps to be a man in today's culture?
Well, that's definitely a part of it. I also think it's difficult to be a man in today's culture because it's my belief that dark and nefarious forces have been trying to destroy our way of life in the West. In particular, if you go and you look it up, there's a long YouTube video of an ex-KGB officer, and he talks about how the Soviet Union intended to defeat the West. And the way that they intended to defeat the West is they were sending people into our open society to basically subvert us from within. And one of the key things they were looking to subvert was the family. And they wanted to basically have men not be as masculine as they were, because masculine, strong men would be able to defend against foreign enemies. But right now, there's a little meme video that's out there, and then in that meme video they show Chinese soldiers. It's a recruiting video for the Chinese army, right? You see these big, tough, strong men, martial music, and then there's also a recruiting video for the Russian army, big, tough, strong men with martial music doing like soldierly things. And then the recruiting video for the U.S. Army right now is, let's talk about pronouns. And I'm like, listen, totally a place to have a conversation about big societal issues, but the job of an army is to defend the nation. You know what I mean? And what you want to be talking about in the army is you want to be talking to big, tough, strong men and having them do tough, manly things and be good at stopping the big, tough, strong men from the other side if they ever decide to invade us, to come through. And it's one of the things that makes me scared about the future of our society is if all of our boys and men become weak, then our enemies will be able to just conquer us without having to do too much.
That's very interesting. I mean, I think there's a lot of what I'm seeing is there's a lot of confusion in our culture. And I don't want to change over to a new subject, but also perhaps we might call it a gender distortion at times with men. But I think you've just made some really valuable points. And I think having strong men in society is really important for women, for children, for other men. So how do we pose the next logical question in this conversation?
That's a terrific question. I think we're living in a time where a lot of men just don't know how to be in a relationship with a woman. I mean, I was married and I screwed up my relationship. If I could have understood how to be with my wife better, I think we could have saved our marriage and saved our family. I just thought being a man who didn't cheat and provided was enough. Well, that's important, but it's not enough. It's not even close to being enough. There's a lot more that's required from a man in a relationship. He needs to, be able to listen to his wife way better than I did. He needs to be able to find interesting and new ways to, surprise and delight her more than I did, to be sure. And he needs to be somebody who is really clear about what's important to him, to his wife. And those are the types of things which I think a lot of men today just have no idea how to do. They get into arguments about things that don't matter, like, hey, put out the garbage. They go, no, you put out the garbage. If you want to put out the garbage, I'm watching the game, or whatever the hell it is. And they make a big deal out of that, which they shouldn't. And they don't make a big deal out of things like, hey, listen, your best friend Billy that you've been friends with since you were 2, I don't want you to talk to him anymore. And they go, oh, okay. Oh, Billy, I can't be friends with you anymore. My wife doesn't like you. Like, you just kind of showed her you're not a loyal man. The people that you've known for the longest can't count on your loyalty. So those are the sorts of things that I think men and women need to be able to work together to figure out. But certainly as a man, one of the things we want to do is teach men how to be the best type of man they can possibly be for themselves, but also for their wives, for their children, and for society in general, because that's not what's happening out there in the world right now.
Yeah, that's what makes this conversation so important to me. I wanted to ask it, just touch on what you're saying. Is it because men aren't grown up? Are men still boys?
That's a great question. There's a lot of men who aren't grown up. They are boys in some respect, but there's just a lot of men who don't know how to be a man. They've bought into the modern myth that being a masculine man is somehow bad and wrong, and that's crazy. It's absolutely crazy from my perspective.
I agree.
Yeah.
And that's what's so special about podcasting, is that we can actually engage and spread a truthful conversation free of greater narratives out there that are confusing us. So I was curious, Nicky, do you find that men collectively embody emotional intelligence? Like, do men have emotional intelligence? I guess things like, do men cry? Do men admit when they're wrong? Do men know how to regulate their emotions instead of just responding? That's always a good sign of an emotional intelligence skill.
Well, look, we say that a man shouldn't take counsel from his emotions, right? There's a quote out there that says a man that takes counsel from his emotions leads a screwed up life. So if a man is going to live a good life, he needs to be somebody that isn't at the whim of his emotions.
So some self-mastery.
Yeah, a lot of it. That's something I struggle with. I sometimes get too emotional and respond rather than, thoughtfully consider my response.
Yeah, I mean, I really honor all your self-reflection. It seems to me that you really go inside to do some inner work. And I was just wondering, when men come from your perspective to a men's group for what I would assume to be support and healing, do you find that these men have untended emotional wounds, trauma?
Some do, but we're not a psychology clinic or a psychiatry clinic, right? So if someone's got trauma, we encourage that individual to go and get that dealt with at that level with a professional, because we're not professionals. That's not what we do. But we do say to men that, if you're just angry or if you got a lot of unexpressed emotion, then we can work with you to have you talk all that out. We also tell men that we don't believe in support. We believe in accountability. We hold men accountable. We don't give them support.
That's a very interesting distinction. So how do men own up to being accountable for their life?
Well, that's what the group's for. Like the whole value of being in a men's group is you go there to be held accountable, so that other men will call you out on your bullshit to yourself and your bullshit to the world, right? Because one of the tendencies men have is they buy their own crap. They tell you wonderful little stories, and they're really good at telling their stories. But if you let them get away with telling those stories, they're not going to get to the truth, and they're not going to really be able to solve whatever issue they're dealing with. And that happens all the time, to me included. I sometimes buy my own crap, and I need other men to just, give me a good kick in the pants to get me out of it. Excuse me.
What are some of the biggest barriers in men that you see in terms of them manifesting their own success?
Laziness. Buying their own crap, blaming others, not taking responsibility.
So self-responsibility, self-accountability, not believing false truths that they tell themselves. And what else?
That's pretty much about it. If you overcome laziness as a man and you take some responsibility for your actions and you take actions, you're going to generate some level of success. May not be Elon Musk level success, but it'll be better success than you currently have.
What other important messages for men would you like to share today?
Join a men's group. Like if you're not part of a group, if you don't have real friends that you can have real conversations with, come check out Sovereign Man. Sovereignman.ca is our website. And listen to our podcast, check out what we're talking about, and join a group. The best thing you can do for yourself is not to try to go through life alone.
Do real men cry?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I don't cry very often. I'm not an emotional person who goes out and cries every day. Certainly not necessarily in public. I may cry in private or with my family, but I can't say I've never cried. I do cry, but I also don't cry at the drop of a hat.
Do you generally find when you're out in this world and in the men's group that men are confronting anxiety? Because I know lots of humans right now have anxiety about many things. Do you find men have anxiety? I know a lot of women.
The world right now is causing, I think, all of us to have some anxiety. I don't think it's a gender specific thing. The last 2 3/4 years have not been good for humans. The level of mental health issues that people are facing is unprecedented, absolutely unprecedented. And Those lockdowns were overkill, in my opinion. And I believe right now the level of inflation in countries like Canada, the United States, the UK, is causing a lot of people a lot of anxiety. Am I going to have enough money to pay the rent, to pay my mortgage, buy food? Those are real issues.
I agree. You have a great track record for coaching people in terms of a success mindset or being successful. So, what are some tips you have for anyone listening that wants to become successful or is challenged by success in this present moment?
Look, if you want to be successful, there are really four qualities that you have to demonstrate. Number one is you've got to be decisive. You've got to make a decision that you are going to be successful. There can't be any tire kicking, as it were. You know what I mean? There's got to be, I'm buying the success car. And, Napoleon Hill, the famous author of Think and Grow Rich, demonstrates this with one of the earliest stories about him. When he was a very young man, he was a newspaper reporter. And he went out into the world and got a job. And his boss sent him to interview the world's richest man at the time, Andrew Carnegie. And Andrew Carnegie and Napoleon Hill met, and they had a good meeting. And near the end of the meeting, Andrew Carnegie said, "Mr. Hill, how'd you like to spend the weekend at my estate?" The richest man in the world asks you if you want to spend the weekend at his estate. Probably going to say yes, right?
Totally.
And he spent the weekend there. And near the end of that time, Carnegie went to him and said, "Mr. Hill, how'd you like to spend the next 20 years? Researching and writing a book about my philosophy of success. I won't pay you a stipend, but what I will do is write letters of introduction to the 500 most successful men and women in the United States, and you can go and interview them." And it took Napoleon Hill 31 seconds to say yes. The rest is history. Many years later, just before the great man passed, the two met one last time. And, Carnegie congratulated Hill on his success. And he also said to him, "I need to tell you something. When we met all those years ago, I had a watch underneath the table with a second hand. And I'd given you 1 minute to make up your mind. And if you hadn't made up your mind in a minute, I was going to withdraw my offer." Hill was quite shocked and said, "Oh, wow, but why?" And he said, "Well, you've been studying my philosophy of success. Why?" He said, "Okay." He said, "I got it. Successful people decide quickly, and unsuccessful people don't." He said, "That's exactly right. I'd approached 4 other men before I approached you. They were the most eminent educators in the United States, and all of them said, 'I'll get back to you.' 2 of them never did, and 2 of them did very, very late. And in my experience, I knew they were the wrong men. I needed someone who was going to make up their mind quickly once they knew all the facts, and that's what successful people do. Secondly, you've got to be committed. You can't be saying, 'I'm going to do this for a short period of time.' You got to be saying, 'I'm in it to win it. I'm willing to be bad before I'm good.' Thirdly, you got to be coachable. You got to take coaching from your coaches and mentors, and you can't do what you want or you think is right. You got to do what they suggest you should do. And then finally, you got to be resourceful. It's going to cost you money to work with mentors. It's going to cost you money to invest in your business and in yourself. And it's going to cost you time and energy as well. You need to have all 4 of these qualities. If you don't have all 4 of these qualities, you're done. You're never going to be successful.
In every conversation that I have, there's usually a moment where you just get kind of like a juicy moment that you're like, yeah. And I think for me, that was it. Like, that felt very helpful to hear those 4 pillars of reaching real success, which I believe we all want to be successful.
We totally do. Nobody wants to live a life of struggle and mediocrity. We all want to live a life of passion and purpose and success.
Exactly. I agree. So, Nicky, on that point, and before we close, I'd like to just ask you to speak to what you tell people to do. You ask them to make the difference that they were born to make. we may have touched on it a bit, but what does that mean exactly?
Look, I think we were all put here on this earth to make a dent in the universe, and we can only do that is if we actually think deeply about that and make a decision that that's what we want to do. And if we decide to do that, if you decide to do that, if I decide to do that, then we're going to move forward and we're going to create a very powerful, life for ourselves. While if we don't do that, if we sit on the couch and watch Netflix all day, if we allow ourselves to be distracted by social media and YouTube and things like that, then in the moment it might feel good, but it's very similar to taking a hit from, a joint or doing a line of Coke or drinking a lot of booze. It'll feel good in the moment, but the repercussions are not fun and not good at all. And in my view, if you want to live a type of life you're going to be proud of at the end of your life, then don't wait, don't delay, move forward. Your time is now. If this year has not been your best year yet, then make it the best last month of the year. And if you do that, then you're going to move forward. And if you don't do that, then you won't. It's that simple.
So the clarity to decide.
Yeah. And act.
And act.
Yeah. 100%. I can tell you a story if you like to close things off.
I'd love to hear a story, Nicky.
So a few years ago, there was a woman who was introduced to us. I work with my lady, and she was the country director for Canada for one of the world's largest personal development firms. And she was very good at her job, but she wanted to grow. And so she brought on a man who she thought was very talented to help her grow the company. And it was kind of like Steve Jobs back in the early days of Apple when he brought on John Sculley. And just like Steve Jobs and John Sculley, at first the two of them got along, but after a while their visions for the future diverged. And they started to, clash. And that clash led to, just like the case was with Steve Jobs and John Sculley with Apple, to her being kicked out of her own company. And so she was bereft. She was not thrilled with the situation. She was wondering. And when she was introduced to us, she was like ready for change. You know what I mean? She wasn't like wanting to be stuck. And as a result of her being ready for change, here's what happened. We were able to work with her. We were able to love on her and help her feel good about herself. We helped her come up with a point of difference so she didn't sound like everybody else. And she got clear on a problem she solved for people. In business, you need to solve problems for people for profit. That's all business is, solving acute problems for wonderful people for awesome profit. And we got her figured out for all that. And she was ready to roll. In her first month, she made $10,000. In her second month, she made $12,000. In the third month, she made $18,000. But in her fourth month, she crushed it and made $62,200. It's a wonderful, wonderful amount of money. And anyways, she lives in Ottawa. I live in Toronto, about 5 hours drive apart. And so she... my son, my eldest son, who was 12 at the time, he had a soccer tournament in Ottawa. She had a son his age. So I called her up and I said, hey, my son and I are coming to Ottawa. How would you like to meet up with us, watch a game and grab some dinner or some lunch, actually? She said, yeah, I'd like that. So we did that. And after, lunch was over, my son and I hopped in my car and we drove back home, and everybody had a great time. Everybody felt really good. A few years later, we had one of our quarterly branded thought leader immersion workshops. And as a result of that, she was there. And we were at the section in our workshop where we tell the new people how they can work with us, the famous upsell, right? And so the way I do it is I ask our existing members to share their experience. It's way more powerful than me telling people this is why you should do our work, right?
Sure.
And so when I asked, hey, who'd like to share, she bounded on stage and said, me. I'm like, okay, sounds great. And so here's what happened. She started to look across the room, and she started to cry. And I was like, in my head, why is she crying? It's like panicking a little bit, What did I do? Right? And in between her tears and her sobs, and we handed her some Kleenex, she said, Nicky, you didn't know this, but when you and your little son came to see me and my little son said to me, the way little boys do, excited, Mommy, who are we going to go meet? And she said, oh, we're going to go meet Nicki Billou and his son. And she said, all of a sudden, my sweet boy became very quiet, very serious. And his voice dropped. And he said, oh, Mommy, are we going to meet the man who saved our family? And look, when you ask, do real men cry? Well, I don't normally cry, but I cried. Aww. She and I hugged. And she said to me, Nicky, when I came to see you, I didn't tell you this, but the bank was about to foreclose on our home. We had not paid our mortgage in months. My husband and I were fighting like cats and dogs every day in front of our 3 small children. And it looked like I was about to lose my precious family. You literally helped us save our family. And we hugged again, and it was quite lovely and wonderful. And I had no idea. And I learned in that moment that you have no idea what someone's dealing with. They might not be ready to tell you yet. And my job, as far as I see it, is I'm looking to help good people who are hurting. That's what I'm looking to do. So I ask God to put other people like her in my path so I can be of service. I just want to help, 50 people like her next year. 10 more people like her between now and the end of the year. And that's a beautiful thing.
That is a beautiful thing and a beautiful intention you just set. I just want to acknowledge you, Nicki Billou.
Thank you, Barbara Pointe.
Nicky, tell me if someone out there would like to get in touch with you to talk or perhaps get coached or join a men's group. What is the best way to connect with you?
Well, if they want to check out the men's group, go to sovereignman.ca. That's the best way. There's all kinds of information there. The podcast for the men is there. And there's information on our program, Sovereign Circle and Battle Ready, there as well. But if they want to have a conversation about their business, there's a link I can give you. It's called ecircleacademy.com/appointment. And if you're a business owner, click on that link, and we have a screening form just to make sure that you are a business owner and that you are indeed serious about wanting to take your business to another level. Fill that out and choose a time. Get on my calendar, and it'd be fabulous to have a conversation with you about where you're at, where you want to be, what's getting in the way, and what it's going to take to get you there.
Amazing. And we will put that link in our show notes. And before we go, one last quick question. Do you just work with men, or do you work with everyone? Because you worked with
in woman. Business, I work with everyone for sure.
Okay.
The men's group is not a business thing. It's just, for all men. But yeah, our business, I work with my sweet better half, Teresa, and we work with any and all people who are good people. That's kind of important. If you're a business owner, click on that link, and we have a screening form just to make sure that you are a business owner and that you are indeed serious about wanting to take your business to another level. Fill that out and choose a time, get on my calendar, and it'd be fabulous to have a conversation with you about where you're at, where you want to be, what's getting in the way, and what it's going to take to get you there.
Amazing. And we will put that link in our show notes. And before we go, one last quick question. Do you just work with men, or do you work with everyone? Because you worked with
in business, I work with everyone for sure.
Okay.
The men's group is not a business thing. It's just, for all men. But yeah, our business, I work with my sweet better half, Teresa, and we work with any and all people who are good people. That's kind of important for us. We have a no asshole rule. So
awesome. All right. Well, let's close for today and thank everyone for tuning in. So many new consciousnesses were brought to light today. Lots of breakthroughs. So thank you, Nicky. And I really encourage and ask everyone listening to reach out to Nicky and also subscribe to our YouTube channel, like, comment, hit that bell, connect with us. Until next time, I'm Barbara Lapointe.